Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 227. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Matt Scott about his political thriller series, Surviving the Lion's Den. All three books in this trilogy, the first, Surviving the Lion's Den, the second, The Iranian Deception, and the third, The Ayatollah Takedown, are available now. The series opens with a race against time. Can the main characters make it safely out of Iran in the midst of a political coup to overthrow Iran's supreme leader? A coup orchestrated by the U.S. government. Inspired by Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, Matt set about to write a series that would explore what it looks like to be inside Iran during a regime change. The books feature CIA operatives, Iranian insiders, international intrigue, geopolitical conflicts, and plenty of fast-paced tension. In this episode, I'll chat with Matt about his writing journey, how he ended up with almost an entirely different book between his first and second rounds of edits, and how a conversation with best-selling author David Baldacci led to this series being written, as well as a few other things. Coming up. Matt Scott, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
I thought what we could do today is start by talking about your new series. You have 3 books out in this trilogy. Surviving the Lion's Den, that's the name of the series. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about the series in general. I want to deep dive into the books, but let's talk about the series in general first and what inspired you to write it.
My inspiration for the series really was my interest in Iran. We've seen a lot of thriller novels where, you have some Iranians that are the antagonists, the villains, but we've never really seen what Iran looks like on the inside. So I wanted to write a series that, would explore Iran from the inside and see what its culture is like, what some of the sites look like, and then kind of build a thriller around it. I was really inspired by Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code because, it was such a phenomenon, but really what more genius parts about the book was, he had this great plot with his Robert Langdon character, exploring Europe through the book. So that's kind of what I wanted to do with Iran. But I also wanted to build a series that would really culminate in the turnover in power in Iran, which I think will eventually happen. Based on the events of, October 7th, the attack on Israel, there's been a lot of political and warlike pressure on Iran. And I think it's getting closer to happening. So it was really my vision of what the overturn in power would look like. But I had to do it in a way that it started with one book and went through a series and culminated in the end.
Okay. Well, let's start with the first book in the series, which is called Surviving the Lion's Den. What I'd like to do is tell us a little bit about where the book opens and then what the characters face going into book 1.
Well, the book opens with a scene that's really close to the end. I took a little bit of a page out of Martin Scorsese's book and did what he did in Goodfellas, which kind of starts it out in the middle. And I put it a little bit more towards the end because in the beginning, you see my main characters trying to get through Turkmenistan and into the U.S. embassy, but they have a bunch of Iranians chasing them. And the question is, are they gonna get in there? So really the opening, what it does is it sets the stage for it. This is going to be a book about the chase. Can they get out of Iran, and can they get away safely? So that's really where I wanted to start. But the book is it's really a two-pronged story. I take one character where his grandfather was killed, and he finds out that the Iranians are responsible. So my protagonist, Carruthers, has to go over to Iran to seek revenge. He doesn't have to, but it's what he chooses to do. And at the same time, you have a kidnapped CIA agent who is trying to escape to unfold the plot of what the Iranians are trying to do. So I can't give away too much, but I mean, they end up coming together in the end, trying to escape, and there is always a politician involved. And in this case, that politician's name is Vivian Walsh, and she's involved with the Iranians, and they want to take over a military base in the Middle East. So they have to escape and not only and foil the plot, but let the world know what's going on. So there's a lot of elements in my novels, but I've gotten really good reactions, and that's just the way I know how to write. It's fun bringing all the little elements together in the end, and all of a sudden at the end the reader's like, oh, okay, I get it now.
So what was the spark for this book, or perhaps maybe the series, that thing, that sort of turning point where you thought, okay, here's the book, here's what I've got, this is what I build on?
I think it was actually when I did my first round of edits, because my first round of the novel was really about three friends that go over there and try to find themselves and end up saving the CIA agent by accident. It just wasn't working. So I had to retool the plot a little bit and combine the three characters into one. But I read a nonfiction book about a CIA agent that got kidnapped in Beirut in the 80s. And I always just wanted to write a novel about a kidnapped CIA agent. That's what just caught my attention. But it's one of those things that's also been done before. So I had to find a way to bring the two characters together and let them escape as one. So I think when you get to the scene where they see each other in prison, I really felt like that was a spark, and that just let everything just unfold naturally. And it was a very, very organic process from then on, because I was able to write 1,500, 2,000 words a day and just knock it out because I knew what I had.
Mm. So was this a novel that you had plotted from the start, or that original novel that you worked with? Was that something you had plotted and written to an outline, or did you pants that novel and then, like as you said, retool it after that?
I'm kind of a hybrid.
Mm.
I'll do a light outline, and it'll say chapter 5. Susan goes to see the prisoner in jail, and that's all it says. And then
Mm-hmm.
I know what needs to follow after that, because I feel like I have to leave myself. The creative process has to take over from that. I'm not like Kyle Mills, who can write an outline that has just about every paragraph written. It doesn't work for me like that. So even when I did the first draft of the novel, I had it, on an Excel spreadsheet, chapters 1 through 60, and just, what basically happens, one-liners happens in each chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I decided to retool it, it made it easy to say, okay, this is too much. I can take this out. I can take this out. I can move this chapter up here. It worked actually really well, because as disappointing as it was to throw away things that I had written, in the end, if something's not working, if it's not helping the novel move along, then it's not worth having. So I just was never afraid to delete something and string it all together so that it flows well.
Mm. Now, did you follow that same process with books 2 and 3?
I
General
did.
outline and then sort of pants from there?
Yeah, I did. The only difference between books 2 and 3 is that the edits were much, much smaller. I knew what by the end of book 1, and I went into book 2, the Iranian Deception, I knew what I had. So I did change it up a little bit here and there, but not in the big bulks or big pieces the way I did the first time around. And every writer has their own process. So this is just what works for me.
Right, right. Well, it sounds like you almost wrote an entirely different book between the first edit and the second.
Yeah, it was my. It's funny. My editor that I hired said the same thing because I think when we got to like page 150 in first round, she's like, "This is starting to feel like a different book," and I kind of okay, I got the point. And when she got the edit back, and she was really blown away. She's like, "This is almost a totally different book," and
Mm,
that was good to hear because it meant that the editing process worked.
right.
I wasn't afraid to lose that first novel, and it goes back to something Brad Thor says: don't be afraid to vomit it out, for lack of a better word. I mean, that was the word that he used, but
Mm,
first round is just for getting it out, and then the real work starts after your first round.
yeah. Do you enjoy the editing process? Is that a part of the overall process that you like being in during that time, or are you more, I prefer the first draft?
Editing doesn't bother me, but I
Mm.
do edit along the way, which
Ah,
which
yeah,
makes it a little bit easier because
yeah.
one of the things that I'll do is when I write the next chapter, I don't write. I never stop in the middle of the chapter. I just can't do it. The chapter has to be complete. So when I write, like when I wrote today, the first thing I did is I went back and reread what I wrote the day before, and I
Hmm.
edited as I went along. And if it didn't work or need to change words, it helps. So when I get to the end of the novel and it comes time to edit the whole thing, it makes it a little bit easier. But to me, by the time you get to the editing process, it's about tying up loose ends and making sure that everything flows well. So it doesn't bother me too much. I mean, I would much prefer just writing, but in the end,
Right.
you have to, if it's not edited correctly and it doesn't flow, then it doesn't work. So the editing part is really one of the most important pieces of the process.
Right. And it sounds like you write in largely a linear manner, start at the beginning
I
and
do.
tackle the story rather than cobbling together, Frankensteining it, as you might
Yeah,
say.
no, yeah, no, I don't do that. The worst thing that'll happen is if I'm looking at my outline and I see that, I haven't had a character that needs to be in the story. I haven't had him in there for 7 or 8 chapters or whatever it is. I'll take a hard look at it and say, well, what else can I include so that the readers don't either forget about this character or it makes it more plausible when he comes back for the chapter that I'm going to be writing about him. So yeah, I can't Frankenstein it. That would drive me crazy. I don't know how I don't know how some writers do it. I know like that's how Kyle Mills does it, and it would drive me crazy. I don't know how they do that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the characters. Let's talk about kind of your main characters. What should we know about them?
Well, there's a couple things. When I did Surviving the Lion's Den, my main character, Kirk Carruthers, was an everyday guy. He is of Iranian descent. He was born in America, but he's part Iranian. But the most important thing about him is that you see everything through his eyes. You see Iran through his eyes. So he's seeing these things for the first time. So are the readers. So that part was important to me, and it is a very personal story for him because he's going over there to get revenge for his grandfather. Now, one of the things that I did in the first book is I introduced a secondary CIA operative named Ben Thrasher. And when I finished book one, I kind of closed the book a little bit on Kirk Carruthers just because, I mean, he's in the other two books, but he's not the main character because I felt like his story was pretty much finished. Like I said, he wanted to go over there to find out about his lineage. But the Ben Thrasher character, I introduced him in book one, but he is my protagonist in books 2 and 3. And he was a lot of fun to write because this is a guy that is chock full of issues, but he is an elite operative. So he's a lot of fun. He's got a lot of crazy quirks to his personality. But the other character is Tom DeLange, the kidnapped CIA agent in the first one. He stays as a constant in books 2 and 3. And then you have the Iranians. You have Farad and Samin, who are part of the resistance in Iran that are trying to overturn the Ayatollahs. And then you have obviously the villains, the generals in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So it was important for me to make the generals in the Revolutionary Guard as evil as humanly possible. And I'm proud to say that I learned that character development reading Vince Flynn novels. For anybody who's out there, if you have not read Vince Flynn, you love spy novels, I hate to give another author a plug, but you're missing out. But that's how I learned. It really is. So it's just, when you take a look at, the ensemble of characters, it's a very personality driven series, I think. I mean, the plot is important, but I'm one of those people who learned about the spy genre. I did not have any military or CIA experience, so I had to do a lot of research. So I can't attest to personal experiences or things that I went through. So I had to rely on my strength, which was the characters. And I think the feedback that I've been given is that the ensemble of characters is really good. They all interact very well. They all have chemistry, and the ones that don't have chemistry rightly don't have chemistry. They're supposed to bristle, and it works well.
It sounds like there's sort of a checks and balances system that you employ. It's a thriller, right? So the plot has to move, the pacing has to be fast, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like you spend an awful lot of time also on the character's sort of personal growth and development and story arc, apart from the thriller portion, the mystery, the that sort of aspect to it.
No, absolutely.
Is that a chapter by chapter, paragraph by paragraph kind of check in, or is it sort of more just like a gut reaction as you're writing?
I would say it's the latter, a gut reaction. I mean, it's development. You can't have, the characters can't be the same from book to book. There has to be some development. How do they change? But it also has to coincide with the story arc. If I'm looking to take down the Ayatollah regime, then their thinking has to change from book 1 to book 3. But it's definitely a gut reaction. I wish I could tell you there's a recipe to it, but this is one of those cases where I just go with what I feel and what I see the characters doing. It sometimes it just seems right to explore their past and their personality a little bit more. Other times you're just moving the action along. But it is important because the characters are what connect to the readers. That's why guys like Michael Connelly, they write the Bosch novels for their entire career, because those writers connect with those characters.
Well, let's talk about the other 2 books a bit. I know you can't give us any spoilers, but can you kind of give us a hint as to what we might find in book 2, The Iranian Deception, and then book 3, The Ayatollah Takedown?
Yeah, book 2, the Iranian Deception, it starts out with the Ayatollah, who was unnamed in book 1, has died, and his successor has come in. So you open up with this great celebration of the new Ayatollah. It turns out that he's got plans to dominate the Middle East using a connection to the Nazis. So when people see the cover of the first book, they're going to see the Iranian Deception. They also see a Nazi flag in the background. So it's a little bit of a contrast, but it ends up working well. And that's where I let my character, Ben Thrasher, I just kind of unleash him into Iran, and they do what they have to foil the plot. That one is very, very action driven. I had a lot of fun writing it. It's one of the things that happened, or one of the things that I was worried about actually, is falling into a sophomore slump, because you have so long to write your first novel, and then when it comes time to your contract, you have to write a second. It's kind of like, what do I do now? So I just kind of went with the idea that I had, and I just kept the action moving, and it worked very well. But the third one is about regime change. Ben Thrasher he's still stuck in Iran, but one of the generals in the Revolutionary Guard, he wants to overthrow the Ayatollah, and he needs the CIA's help to do it. And there is one scene, I think it's probably call it about halfway into the book, and it's something that was very unexpected that happened. I don't think people would ever see it coming, but it changes the entire story arc of how they go about implementing the regime change that was originally planned. And again, you still have the politicians involved in all 3 novels, but The third one was basically my vision for regime change. I wish that I could say, or I wish that I could have predicted, October 7th and how it happened. And I doubt that my vision of regime change in book three will be exactly what ends up occurring. But it was a go for broke type plot line for me, and it's like this is just what I want to do, and this is how I see these characters ending up in a new Iran.
One of the things you mentioned earlier was that the book is about CIA agents and
Mm-hmm.
in an organization that operates largely in secret, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of a better word. Now,
Yep.
you and I were both at BoucherCon, and I believe this is where I heard Mick Herron say this, but he mentioned that, and I'm paraphrasing, that in writing his Slow Horses books,
Mm-hmm.
he was able to make a lot of stuff up, even though it's about MI5 and the clandestine
Right.
services.
Yeah.
It's not like secret agents are coming out of the woodwork to tell him, no, 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 you got it wrong. Here's how we really do it.
Yeah.
So, do you find that writing about the CIA, which
Mm-hmm.
operates kind of without a lot of public view,
Right.
allowed you to kind of make stuff up? Or did you really try to keep as close as you can to how you believe it's actually done?
Um, a little bit of both.
Hmm.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things that I had to make up in terms of plot, but in terms of tactics, I tried to be as close to what I think they do as humanly possible. I mean, I do have a lot of nonfiction books on my bookshelf that were CIA agents who have survived their tenure in the field. Go out and talk about some of the things they did and how they did it. So I tried to be as close to that as humanly possible, because the last thing you want to do is insult the agents in the field with stuff that is obviously they would never do. But at the same time, they're going to have to take chances. I mean, I think there's in book two, I had my character Ben Thrasher and kill a Pakistani ISI agent, and the CIA agent that I had that read the book afterward, he's like, he would go to jail, if this happened. So, I mean, and in reality, he would, but that's the fiction part of it that allows people to, fantasize and, romanticize the characters, and they can decide whether or not they think he's a badass or if he's just a stone cold killer. But it's the tactics and the way they conduct themselves in the field that I think has to be authentic. Everything else you can kind of make up as you go along.
Did you spend a lot of time researching before you started writing book one, or is it a case of research and write kind of at the same time?
For books two and three, it was research and write at the same time.
Mm.
For book one, I did a lot of research beforehand because I had to, Iran is so closed off to the West, especially the United States. You really have to go out and look and try and find research material about it. So, I read about the hostage crisis in 79 and how the hostages conducted themselves and things that were going on, and people that have been imprisoned in Iran and gotten out. But as technology has developed, one of the things that I've noticed is that as harsh as the Iranian government is on Facebook and Twitter, they are surprisingly lenient on Instagram and YouTube. And with everybody having a dash cam or a camera phone these days, it gave me the ability to kind of go inside and see what these palaces look like, or what do the streets look like? Do they have they have crosswalk signs, or do people just cross the street and kind of play chicken with the cars? And as it turns out, it was the latter. There was a really, really good documentary about Iran on, I think it was Amazon Prime, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but it showed a commercial that's on Iranian state TV about the Iranians fighting back against what they call the oppressive American regime. And I was able to take that commercial and find a way to insert it into the novel. So in terms of what things look like, you have to do a lot of research. But as I did books two and three, because I knew the characters and where I wanted to take it, I could do research as I went along.
Now, you've got these three books out. I'm curious, is this something you had always wanted to do, to write books or to write thrillers? Or is this something you sort of stumbled upon later in life?
Oh, I definitely stumbled on it later in life.
Really?
And yeah, oh yeah. The truth of the matter is, in high school, college, I mean, I hated reading. I absolutely hated it. Uh, and it was just because, we were forced to read things that I just had no interest in. I mean, Watership Down, The Good Earth, The Invisible Man, the Gulag Archipelago. I just could not get through it. And then when the Da Vinci Code came out, like I said, it was such a phenomenon that I didn't want to be the only one not reading it. So it just kind of happened from there, and then Dan Brown led me to Vince Flynn. Vince Flynn led me to Brad Thor, to Brad Taylor, to Joel Rosenberg. So my love for reading just kind of developed. And what people don't realize is that when you read, for me, thriller novels, but for any genre, you're taking a master class in how these iconic authors, develop their story. So by way of osmosis, I guess, I just kind of started thinking, I think I could do this. And I was at a time in my life, and when I wrote the first one, where I was in a dead end job. I wasn't going anywhere. And I just needed to do something that would hopefully better define my career. And I went to Williamsburg, Virginia, and I met David Baldacci. And at that point, I was 39 and I was getting ready to be 40. So I go up to him. I was like, is 39 too old to write your first novel? And he stops mid signature. I'm not kidding you. I can see the dot in the book where he stopped. And he looks up at me. He says, hell no, the industry could use some good young authors. Now, I didn't know if I should be happier that he was telling me to go forth with my mythic destiny, or if he thought that 40 was still young. But I went straight home and I said, there's no reason for me not to do this, because the worst thing that's going to happen is I end up right where I'm at. And for me, it just ended up being a journey of, I guess this is something that I wanted to have on my tombstone, because I didn't want to live with the regret of not having done it. And, I was never much of a story writer. I've always enjoyed writing. I've always been, good at essays and things like that. But I just took the process organically and decided that this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And then we'll figure out the rest later. And I was fortunate enough that, my creative side really took hold, and I learned a lot about myself, how I write, the writing process in general, and certainly the business of writing. But sometimes you just have to jump feet first into the fire and figure it out. And had I not done that, I don't think I would have had the gumption to go for it. But I knew that if I didn't, I would never do it.
Well, now that you've written 3 books, do you have plans for more? What kinds of works in progress do you have going?
Yeah, I do have plans for more novels. I was actually working on book 4 before we started this call. I can't tell you too much about it, but it's not an international thriller. It has a more of a domestic setting. It's set in Memphis, and I'm about a little bit more than a third of the way through it. So my contract with the first 3 books with that publisher is complete. So I'm going to have to go through the process of requerying an agent and hopefully finding a better agent and new publisher that can take me on. But I have a lot of experience behind me now, and I certainly have a lot better contacts, having met authors through BoucherCon and through social media, because the author community, I've learned, is just so supportive of one another, so supportive. And if you need help, they're there to help you. And that's been one of the great things about this experience. But, story-wise, it's a new story, new book, new character, and hopefully I'll land on my feet, because I'm hoping to finish the first round by, I guess, around February, and then we'll see what happens.
Excellent. All right. Well, if people want to learn more about you, the books you've written, the books that will hopefully come out, any other news, that sort of thing, where can they go to find you and that information?
Yeah, you can go to my website, mattscottbooks.com. I have trailers of all three books, sample chapters, summaries of all 3 books. And if you go to the blog section, you can see some of the other articles that I've written, not only about the books, but the literary world in general, and sometimes where I think it's going, the thriller genre. But you can also check in with me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Matt Scott Books is where you can find me.
Excellent. And if they want to purchase a copy of hopefully all of the books in the Surviving the Lion's Den series, where can they go to buy them?
You can get the e-reader version anywhere, whether it be Apple Books or Barnes & Noble e-version, whatever that is. Those are available everywhere. But if you want the print copy, you have to go to Amazon. But if you want a signed copy, you can reach out to me on one of the social media sites, and we'll work something out, and I'll sign the book for you, and we'll do it by way of Venmo or something like that, and I'll mail it out to you. I go to the post office just about every Friday.
Excellent. Well, Matt, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast, and I want to wish you luck with Surviving the Lion's Den, the whole entire series, all 3 books in the trilogy, and the new one you're working on. Fingers crossed that we'll see that on our bookshelves soon. So congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far, and best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published, as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author, or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.